Hey geeks, welcome back for another episode of Best Geek Vlog Ever, the weekly web show that proves it's okay to be a geek. We're your hosts, Brenden Toda and
Ezequiel Gutierrez.
This week's episode is entirely Marvel themed to celebrate the release of Iron Man 3. We're going to start with our segment called Countdown, where we count down
something.
Exactly.
On today's countdown, we'll be discussing our top 3 favorite moments from the Marvel Phase 1 universe, which include
Iron Man, The Incredible Hulk, Iron Man 2, Thor, Captain America, the First Avenger, and The Avengers.
So number 3 for me is the post-credit sequence from the first Iron Man, which basically set the entire world in motion, setting the groundwork for what would become the epic Marvel Universe leading up to and concluding in The Avengers. Seeing Nick Fury in that end scene with Jarvis and that someone got the jump on Tony Stark was very interesting, and then just the Avengers initiative. I mean, who was not excited? I still think that remains the best post-credit sequence to date.
Number 3 moment for me is the first time Tony Stark suits up in Iron Man 1. So I was watching Iron Man 1 with my best friend Micah, and that part where the suit was first going on to Tony with all of the different mechanical arms and everything was probably the most magical for me, because I could watch the awe wipe across his face, because he was going from the smile to the and the hands to the face and everything. That was probably one of the coolest moments. And then just talking about it afterwards.
My number 2 moment comes from Captain America, the First Avenger. It's actually the sort of middle montage moment. Captain America is doing the USO tour to raise bonds for the war effort. That song is so perfect, fitting for the time, fitting for the place, and just a really cool moment where for the first time our character is sort of just coming to grips with what his role is in that film, which later will obviously change and he'll become the fully realized Captain America. But that song to me, I think, deserved an Oscar, and it's just the highlight from the movie filled with a bunch of really great moments.
My number 2 moment is kind of a cheat, because I'm going to call all the post-credit teases as individual moments summed up into one from all of Phase 1. For me, as it built, each one, although the best one being the first one, they got progressively, oh my gosh, this is happening, this is really going on. And by the time you get to Captain America, and you get the full Avengers tease, which happens at the end of that, it's not even an Avengers tease, it's like the first trailer, really.
Yeah, basically.
That's when it's like, all right, here we go. And then by the time you get to the full movie, I was so ready.
My number 1 comes from what is probably my favorite movie of the Marvel Universe, which is The Avengers. And it's got to be that entire fight sequence at the end, but more importantly, the fight sequence that kind of is one
continuous shot.
One continuous shot. I remember realizing that was happening, going, they haven't cut yet. The camera is just flying through that entire town. And I think the highlight of that sequence is where Captain America is fighting the Chitauri on the ground. Iron Man stops by for a second, enough to offer his laser beam, shield turn, cut in half type situation. That moment right there was the highlight of that entire fight sequence, and I think that has to be my favorite moment of the entire series so far.
My number 1 moment is the exact same as yours. The highlight for me in that scene is actually the end of that, where the Hulk like punches Thor off screen and then just kind of Yeah. You know, for non-comics readers, the panels in comics are always very strategic, especially in the storytelling nowadays. So, you know, you have smaller ones, close-up shots, similar to what you have in the movie, but then you have splash pages where you can go from one side of the book to the other. You can't do that in film, because film's always in the same aspect ratio. You're always forcing the person to look. How do you do a splash page in a big blockbuster movie? I think this is how you do it.
Yep.
So that brings us to our segment we like to call Knee Jerk, our uncensored, honest but brief reaction to today's geeky topic. Today's topic being the review of Iron Man 3. Cut to the footage now. Now?
Somebody cut to the footage.
Now. Do you think he's going to cut right in the middle of a
Hey geeks, so we just got out of the first screening of Iron Man 3, the first movie this summer that kicks off Marvel's Phase 2, and we're here with our special guest, the biggest Iron Man fan we know, if that wasn't obvious, Micah Rush. You're our guest, so your reactions.
Without giving spoilers, because I will clarify that I'm not allowed to do that. Absolutely love the film. There's, you know, as a fanboy, there's a lot of things that I will gladly critique from a comic book standpoint, but from just a, Marvel film lovers, absolutely fantastic. Enjoyed every moment of it.
I think Shane Black did an incredible job. Not so much change the tone of the film, because there is some tonal changes, but just the overall sort of like theme of the character and the villain and his relationships with people, really very good. Easily one of the strongest Marvel films, if not the best Iron Man film.
It's very enjoyable, a lot of pop, a lot of flash, very different from the other Iron Man films that we've seen up to this point. The big complaint about Iron Man 2 is not enough time was spent with Tony or with Iron Man himself. This is all Iron Man. This is entirely a Tony Stark story. I think that's what's most enjoyable about this film.
Great big action set pieces, quite a few actually, because I feel like that's one of the complaints that people have, is that there's just not enough of those things. That scene with Air Force One is spectacular, but then the end scene with all the suits is just like amazing. Really strong entry, but again, it's surprising that they almost conclude this. It's like this is the trilogy and it's over. Like, I feel like if they didn't make any more Iron Man films, this really wrapped everything up, sort of, They told this story, and now we're done. But it would be devastating if he didn't return. As a film to kick off Phase 2, this doesn't really kick anything into motion, except for the last end credit scene. Stay for the credits, obviously, if you haven't seen it yet. That's the only thing that's sort of like, hey, there's still this going on. But other than that, Iron Man 3 as a whole film really does nothing to, like, add to get ready for Phase 2.
So now we turn to Micah Rush for his final opinion on Iron Man 3.
I'll be giving it 4.5 arc reactors out of 5 full functioning arc reactors.
If Iron Man 1 is 4.5 for me, this is 4. Bluth bananas out of 5. Bluth bananas.
So I'm going to give it 4 out of 5 Matrix of Leaderships. So now we're going to toss back into the studio and go.
Us.
Yeah.
But not him.
He won't be there.
No. Go.
Well, that was great, wasn't it?
Oh.
Yeah. It's interesting what they said.
Those two guys have something going on there.
Really?
Actually,
Well-
3 guys.
Well, we're going to go ahead and wrap up today's Marvel-themed episode with our BGVE QOTD.
What?
That's right. The best Geek Vlog Ever's question of the day.
That still doesn't make sense.
Yes, it does. So to keep this themed Marvel, there's been a lot of talk about the fact that Robert Downey Jr.'s contract actually ends with this film. So there's been a little bit of uncertainty about whether he would be reprising or come back. Personally, I don't see Iron Man continuing without Robert Downey Jr., but it's very possible that after playing this character for so long, Robert Downey wants to explore some other avenues, and who can blame him? But that's led to a lot of speculation about what they would do with the character if Robert Downey decided not to come back. So, who would you like to see take over as Iron Man if Robert Downey Jr. decides not to come back? Which actor do you think could best fulfill the role of Tony Stark in Iron Man in future Iron Man and or Avengers films? My sort of out of left field choice, I think, would be John Hamm from Mad Men.
I somehow thought you would eventually get to him.
He looks good in a suit, he's slick, he's kind of a douchebag. So
You hear that, John Hamm? You're a douchebag, kind of.
Douchebag. Extremely talented. Very, very, very talented. He's got that dark, brooding, way about him. I think he's we've seen him in public at least with the scruff and stuff like that, so he could pull off the look for sure, and he just looks like some guy who should be driving around in a fancy car. My number one choice to replace Robert Downey Jr. Would be Bradley Cooper. Again, he fills those requirements of looking really good in a suit, but he's got this air about him that I think is present in films like Limitless, and he's got the action thing down. If you saw A-Team, which was a pretty solid action film, he's capable of doing that. I think having this sort of established persona that we have of Tony Stark and Iron Man, Bradley Cooper could easily just sort of slide in there, and we wouldn't lose much. Now that's not saying that if we had the opportunity, we'd keep Robert Downey around, because I think the guy was born to play this role, and he fills it so perfectly. But I think Bradley Cooper would do a hell of a job.
the success of the Marvel movies have a lot to do with Robert Downey's commitment, his enthusiasm for the brand. He's not shy about how much he is Iron Man. This past year at Comic-Con 2012, he had a great moment of stepping on stage with a bunch of kids who were dressed up as Iron Man, and it was just like an awesome moment for fanboys, but also for families in general. I think that's what has the crossover appeal of all of these Marvel movies, is doing precisely that. Not only appealing to us uber nerds who go on to YouTube and talk about it every week, but also to families who are raising their kids to wear arc reactors and have gauntlets instead of capes and cowls like when we were kids. Yeah. So I think that's an interesting point as well. And whoever happens to try to follow him needs to be in that same type of vein, I think. They need to be committed to servicing the fanboys, but at the same time being appealing to families and kids. So that's going to about do it for this week's episode of Best Geek Vlog Ever. If you want to keep up to date with all our latest episodes, hit the subscribe button right here. New episodes are uploaded every Monday. If you have a suggestion for topics on next week's episode, leave it in the comments section down below, or hit us up at our Twitter at EpicHappensHere. For Best Geek Vlog Ever, we're your hosts, Brenden Toda and
Ezequiel Gutierrez.
And remember, every weekday is a geek day.
Tony Stark makes you feel he's a cool exec with a heart of steel.
As Iron Man, all jets ablaze, he's fighting and smiting with repulsor rays. Amazing armor,
As Iron Man,
a blazing bomber.
as Iron Man.
To challenge them is to court death.
If he holds the reality gem, that means he can jump from different realities. This will be our link to the Marvel Universe from the Star Wars universe.